Hi everyone! By the looks of it, you can see that I am not in my own Genshin account. As you know, I don't have Yoimiya, but here we have Yoimiya on screen, and that is because I am in one of the accounts that we are going to be giving advice for and reviewing it. This is the first video to the whole series of me repairing and reviewing accounts. Hopefully you check the community post and just note that I am here to give advice to these accounts. If you want your account featured, make sure to do the form that I have in my community post as well. But these videos are going to be a little more chill and they're more account specific, where I'm going to provide the right advice for the accounts just based on my own game knowledge and experience playing these teams and all these other things. Again, these videos are going to be a little more laid back and casual than my normal ones, so grab a snack if you want and let's get started with our first few accounts. The account that I am on today is an AR-57 player, and I want to start by taking a look at the character list that we have so far. Of course, we have Yoimiya and a bunch of these other characters. However, I do see some of the characters that I play only at level 50, such as Hu Tao, and characters that I think could be definitely raised, such as Zhongli as well. So after discussing with the owner of the account some ways that they want their account improved, she has told me that she wants a second team for the Abyss and other content. As of now, the team that she currently uses for the Abyss is Nuvilette, Kazuha, Furina, and Kokomi. However, I see a lot of other characters that have great potential and can definitely be used in the Abyss. Just taking a quick look at the weapons, here are some of the weapons and materials. There is still plenty of enhancement ores, and there's also some artifacts, well, a lot of artifacts that can be used. Here are the character XP materials, and also I will mention all the refinements here later. But again, there are plenty of resources that can be used to create lots of things needed to build up this account. There's also this much fragile resin, so that's good too. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to mention was that a lot of these characters don't have artifacts and are not built, but in order to focus your attention on building characters, you need to focus on a team that you want to use, and I have come up with a few suggestions just depending on what your playstyle is. And remember, this advice can go to anybody that has an account in a similar state. So I noticed that you do have a level 90 Ayaka, and she also does have her signature weapon at level 92, and she does seem pretty built for the most part, so you would be able to use her and will not have to do any additional building. These team comps are ones that I have looked up online, which you can also access as well, and just based on the characters I'm seeing here, this is the team that would probably suit it best. It might not be great for all types of content, but this is a usable team where you use Ayaka, and then you can also have Ganyu, Ayato, and Kokomi. But because you are using Kokomi in one of your previous teams, you could just use another Hydro applicator. I noticed you also have Yelan, and sadly you have a level 22 Xingqiu, which I really think you should level up because he is a great addition to any account. I do know that Ganyu is a charge attack DPS, and if you're not a fan of a charge attack DPS, that's okay. You don't have to level up Ganyu, and this weapon that is on her right now is mainly good for the charge attack DPS. Also, it looks like Ayato has not been built at all. If you're not a fan of playing Ayato, that's okay too. But it looks like there are plenty of weapons that you could possibly use on him. But one weapon that I did notice in general that I really think you should level up is the Fleuve Cendre. I used this one on Furina, and I did max refine it, which you can also easily get just by fishing. This is a great addition to your account as well, and I really think this is the one you should prioritize leveling up. But again, if you are not a fan of a freeze comp, I also have another option. If you like Yoimiya, we can have a Yoimiya Vaporize comp. I noticed that you have Yelan at level 80, and you still can ascend her. You might just have to farm some of her materials. Yelan is such a great sub DPS. Her best in slot would be the Emblem of Severed Fate, which is a domain that you can also get artifacts for Yoimiya. Since I noticed that Yoimiya doesn't have an artifact set either, if you do farm the Emblem of Severed Fate, you would also be getting Shibanawas, which is great on Yoimiya. So it's basically a win-win, and it seems like maybe you've been switching artifacts around, which is okay. But if you do farm for Yelan's artifacts and Yoimiya's, you'd be getting both artifacts from one domain, and you would save time definitely. And it saves you the hassle from also having to strongbox. I just think that Yelan should definitely be invested in. I know you do have this bow on her, but she could also use Favonius. It would be great to have that event bow that she came with when the Chasm came out, but again, that's an event weapon, so you can't really go back and get it. But this energy recharge one would be great because you do need her burst in order to work with Yoimiya, since it's paired with the normal attacks that you do. But along with that, I really also think Xingqiu should be invested in, and I will go back to him for another team comp that I suggested, but Xingqiu in general is just really good to add to any team. He could also run the Emblem of Severed Fate, or if you have no bless, that's okay too. I recently just switched him onto the Emblem of Severed Fate, and obviously you would want to level up your sacrificial sword, and you do have it at refinement rank 5, which is great too. I only have mine at R2 I think, but since you do have it at R5, it's even better, and again you want to prioritize some talents. I noticed that you also have Zhongli on your account account, and Zhongli is such a great character too. However, I do see that you have a DPS weapon on him. If you do want that, that's totally fine. But again, there's also Black Tassel if that is what you want to have, because it does have an HP substat, but this one also does have an HP substat. However, the passive skill is not really the best, and for the Black Tassel, it's not like it's any better, but it just depends if you want to use him as a support or a DPS. I would just hope that he's holding on to this for Xiao in the future, maybe. But I really think Zhongli can be invested in, especially as a support character, and you do have a lot of artifacts you could potentially put in the strongbox, or use them as XP material for leveling up those artifacts. Zhongli is also pretty easy to build because he just needs HP, and you would definitely want to raise his elemental skill. You don't need to level up his normal attack at all, just use him as a support character. Another team that you could possibly use is a Raiden National team because you do have Xiangling built. However, I see you don't have the catch as one of your weapon options, which is something that you could farm. It does take a little while, but it is worth it. You also have Bennett, and I can tell that he is going to be C6, but I'm not going to touch that, don't worry. And obviously you would need to level up Xingqiu, but I just think in general you can use him for that. Also, Xingqiu can be placed in so many teams, and that's why I think you should level him up. If the Raiden National is not your style, you could always have an overload comp. You have Chevreuse, however she would need some investment, but just know you have Raiden, so you could make an overload comp. It's just up to you and your playstyle. I know overload can sometimes be a little annoying to work with, and that's totally fine. You also have Nahida, which is perfectly fine to use. It seems like she does have some artifacts on her, and she could have her talents leveled up a little more. And also you do have sacrificial fragments on her, which is okay too. Nahida would be great in a Hyperbloom team if you do want to use Raiden. And again, you do have a lot of Hydro characters that you could use as well. So Hyperbloom is not a bad option, especially since Hyperbloom is really popular in the Abyss. I definitely think that using your resources for a Hyperbloom team would be worth it. For one of the teams that I would highly suggest is a Hu Tao Vaporize team. You have all the characters needed for a Hu Tao Vaporize team. You could even put Xiao's weapon on her, but again, it's just up to playstyle and what you want. She would need some artifacts. I use Crimson on her, and Crimson is a little bit annoying to farm, especially because Lava Walkers is not really that helpful, but if you choose to strongbox it, that's perfectly fine as well. Hu Tao, however, you should level her up just a little more, and also if you take my advice and level up Xingqiu, you could put him on the Vaporize team. These characters are the ones that I use on my own Vaporize team, and it works perfectly fine. And even since you have Zhongli, you can add him as your 4th slot on the Vaporize team. Normally I just have Farina, which I know is not the best option, and sometimes I do use Bennett on my team. It really just depends on the purpose that I'm using it for, but you do have Zhongli, so that's a pretty solid option for that team. Hopefully one of those team options suits you. I would suggest just choosing one of those team options rather than leveling up every single character because you will definitely get burned out. My go-to would be a Vaporize team because of how different it is from your Mono Hydro team that you already run, and a Freeze team is very similar to a Mono Hydro team, and it wouldn't be the most versatile for the Abyss. Like I mentioned in my Abyss tips video, I said that you want to have 2 very different reactions with different elements included. That allows you to switch them between the 2 different sides of the Abyss and use them in the most appropriate situation. So that is it for the team comp suggestions, but now let's go on to the account content itself. So going back to all these refinement materials, there is no harm in using them whatsoever. They will only boost your account, and they have really no use just being here. I know if you want to keep them as a keepsake memory, but in all honesty, you would rather just put them in the weapons themselves. It will just make the weapon stronger overall, so that's perfectly fine. Another thing, if you do have the time, you might want to start collecting resources for your characters so you can get them built. Also, I can see that you are saving your Primo Gems. For now, I don't suggest pulling on any character banners, mainly because you do have a lot of characters that need building first, and I know that the moment you get a new character, it might be tempting to build them, but then it's not always a good idea to lose focus on who you're building currently. Just prioritize building your own characters for now before you start pulling for new ones. Also, I suggest doing these world quests at the bottom, mainly because they're really quick and easy, and then focusing on the Archon quest and working your way down. For now, it seems like there are a lot of these long quests that require doing. All these quests do take a while, but you do need to do them. Also, they give quite a few good rewards, and it is a way to get resources that you need without having to use your resin for it. That's mainly how I get my source of Mora. If you're wondering how I get most of my XP in Mora, I do not do ley lines, I just do quests and exploration, since they do give enough materials for me to be able to level up all my characters. Also, if you're thinking of exploring, I highly recommend doing Fontaine, mainly because the chests in Fontaine give more Primo Gems than the ones in Inazuma. Also, a lot of the Inazuma rewards are common chests, which is not always really good, whereas the ones in Fontaine are much better, but also you do have Chenyu that you want to unlock, and it seems like the desert really hasn't been touched, but that's okay because mine hasn't either. And there are are the Natlan quests available for you to do as well, but again, that's just based on what you feel like you have the time to do. I wouldn't worry too much about Enkanomiya or the Chasm at the moment. These are not the most fun places to explore. I just highly suggest Fontaine over any other region, since the scenery I find is more beautiful than the other places, and I can explore Fontaine for longer hours than other regions. If you do still want other farming methods, we also have TCG. However, TCG is kind of a niche thing, and it does require you to take a little bit of time to learn the game. That's just if you want to do that, that's an option for you. But as of now, just stick to building the team comps that you are planning to play before anything else. And these 5-star weapons, especially the one on Raiden, I would recommend leveling this up to 90. And also, if you are looking for a Hu-Tao weapon, we have Black Cliff Pole, and it is available this month. But if you aren't able to get it this month, you could always get it in the future. That's honestly just up to you. But as of now, it seems like a lot of characters are missing artifacts or usually using the wrong weapon. And if you are struggling to put the right weapons on characters, I suggest just looking up a build guide for them. There's no harm in doing that. Or if you feel like creating the builds yourself, you can always read the weapon descriptions and artifact descriptions to find a team and build that suits your team best. You do have all the fragile resin. Just make sure you are doing your dailies and using your resin, and you should be fine. Don't use your fragile resin as of now. There are ways to get the resources you need without having to use resin, especially when it comes to leveling characters. Don't spend your resin on ley lines. I would rather you spend the resin on artifact farming or talent books. But things like Mora, character EXP, and talent books can all be found through exploration, so you wouldn't want to use your fragile resin on things you can just naturally find. I do think your characters have a lot of potential, and so does your account. You have plenty of the characters that I know I definitely wanted, and a lot of 5-stars as well, especially weapons. And all it is a matter of choosing who you want to build and which teams exactly you want to play, and then investing your resources in those characters. So that was mostly it for this account in particular. Again, this is just based on my own game knowledge and own game experience. If you think that you have other advice based on your own game experience, feel free to let me know in the comments, and let's all help each other out with our character builds. If you have any team suggestions or questions or things you want to clarify, also let me know. But now let us move on to our next account. So we are here on this next account. Now, the thing that's really special about this account is that it is one of the lower level players, so these tips will definitely apply to those people that are still in the early stages of the game. Obviously, if you are in the late stage of the game, you can still watch and see if you find anything helpful, but if you are also watching to get tips for your own account, many of these tips will apply to players in the earlier game. So just taking a quick look, we have an account that is still at AR 25, and in terms of quest progress, they are in Chapter 1 Act 1, and there's still a lot of story quests to do and world quests too. So if you still are an early game player and don't really know what to do with your account or need a direction in which to go, hopefully some of these tips will apply to you. But as usual, I'm going to sort this into 2 different parts, one in terms of account progress and 2 in terms of account builds. So I have done some looking around and I am taking notes of what I see. Obviously, because this is an early game account, things might be harder to do and harder to access. So I am going to start with the account itself. Looking at the list of characters, these are the ones available. Clearly, these 3 characters have not been leveled yet. I'm not sure if the user wants to level them or not, but then these are the ones that are leveled, which they are pretty good. Only for the early game though, I suggest switching them out later on, but after some observation, here are the notes that I have. So in terms of these characters, the only really good DPSs are Kaya, Noelle, and possibly Beidou. Also Hazel, but I will mention why leveling up Hazel is not really a good option in the early game. And if you do want to use the Traveler at all in your journey, you can always level them up. And also there are the other elements that you can switch them to, but obviously if you don't want to play the Traveler, that's okay too, there are other options. As of now, you have the characters to do an Electrocharge Swirl team. You could use Beidou, Barbara, Sucrose, and if you want to use Anemo MC, and also there are other options like Lisa and Lynette. However, you don't really have any other options for Hydro other than Barbara, but that might be someone you want to invest in the future. As of recording this, we will have Nubilette's banner coming out soon, so in case you want to get Nubilette, he would make a great addition and as a DPS for your whole account. Nubilette also runs with so many different team comps, so Electrocharge is not only the one you can use, and there are a ton of support characters that are available here too. However, these are the starting characters that most people really get, but if you do want to progress further in the game, instead of using Noelle, I switched her out for a different character. You could switch her out for Barbara because Barbara heals more than Noelle does, and also Noelle needs to be on field in order to heal for her burst, whereas Barbara doesn't because she'll just heal with her support effect. And having access to Kaya and Lumine could be freeze swirl so your enemies will not hit you. They work really well for the early game because you'll be able to clear things if your enemies are frozen. And also, Kaya does a really good job at keeping your enemies frozen because of his burst, and the same thing goes for Barbara's skill. As for weapons, if your early game inventory also looks like this, or maybe even your late game inventory looks like this, I have no idea, there are the ones like the Prototype Rancor, Dragonspine Spear, and Snowterm Star Silver. These ones are all from quests, except for the Prototype Rancor, but the ones with physical damage bonus, I would avoid leveling them up because they aren't really that useful, and physical damage is not really a big thing in the late game. Unless you are playing Eula, if you're one of those people, then yes, you can level up the Claymore, but I did level up Dragonspine Spear for my Rosaria, but it didn't really end up helping that much because it is not really her best team comp. Since Rosaria is mostly a support and not a DPS, which I did run her as a DPS, but that's a whole little story. You do have Stringless, which is a really great bow for support, but because as of now there are not really many other characters you can put them on except for Amber, you can keep it on Amber for now, but if you do get Official, switch it right away. Official is great on Stringless because of EM, and for support Barbara, I highly suggest putting Thrilling Tales on her instead rather than Favonius Codex, mainly because of the healing effect and for HP since she scales off of that. Don't worry too much about artifacts, but the main thing is don't get rid of your 4-star artifacts, like don't feed them into the other artifacts. You can feed in your 1-star artifacts and your 2-star artifacts into the 4-star ones, but try to avoid feeding your 4 stars into other 4 stars, mainly because you might need them later on, and it's just better to have the highest level ones and a lot of them, rather than just a few really good ones, because in case you might need to put them on other characters or switch them around sometimes. As for resources, saving them up for now is a really good option in the early game. Only spend on the characters that you are planning to use, like you don't need to level up the level 1 Razor or Chongyun or any of those unless you are planning to use them, which I suggest you don't because they're not the best in the late game or Spiral Abyss, but if you really do want to use them, then invest your resources into those particular characters rather than spending all into a bunch of characters. And for resource gathering, since you are still part of the early game and exploration hasn't really been accomplished just yet, while you are going out and exploring the map, just make sure to collect everything that you see. This will help you way later when you are trying to level up characters from Mondstadt, or if you need lizard tails and frogs, and just all of those other little creatures that you need to go around from the map. It's better that you collect everything you see now rather than have to run around way later when you're like AR 60. Thankfully, I collected so many frogs to last me a lifetime that I never have to go and farm them out again. The same thing goes with Primogems. You do still have Primogems as of now, and it is best just to save them on a character you really want rather than try your luck on every banner, because sometimes that character might not be applicable to your account. I know it can be tempting to just pull for every single character that you see, but just think about the state that your account is in and whether or not you actually need that character. For example, you might not need a Linny because you don't have supports for Linny. However, you might want a Neuvillette because you can run him on Electrocharge team. Again, for saving resources, if you have these billets to craft weapons, just save them now, unless you are actively building a character and their best weapon is a craftable one. But since there are many weapons being added to the game, sometimes the craftable one isn't always the best. I just saved a bunch of these in my early game in case I needed them way later, and it really did help because I could just go into my supply and choose the weapon that I needed to make. Just in general, if you do have these in your account, just save them because you never know when you're going to need them way later, and it's always better to have them than to just worry and wait and do weekly bosses until you get one. Same thing goes with Fragile Resin. Don't use this until you are at the max level to do domains, or as people call AR 45. Just use this either on the highest world level for bosses or the highest level domains. Now on to the account progress part. This part it will be a little bit more important if you are in the early game, because doing everything in the right order is really helpful and will save you a lot of time and energy. The main thing you want to prioritize every day is logging in and doing your commissions and also using all your resin. Once you have used all of that, go in and do all the Archon quests. Since you are currently in Liyue, you might as well finish the Liyue Archon quest and access the Serenity Pot. You don't need to start in Azuma just yet. You can stop after finishing the Liyue Archon quest and just go on and do the story quest, as well as all these other world quests too. These world quests are super quick and easy, and they will give you useful rewards that you can use, so it's not like you're wasting your time at all. The main thing though is doing the Archon quest so that you can unlock everything, because once you finish the Archon quest, then everything in that region will mostly be unlocked. This just helps you prevent running into the problem where a certain area needs to be unlocked or an Archon quest needs to be finished before you can do that area, so it's just important to do the Archon quest first. Another really important thing to do is just collect your oculi and explore your map too. Obviously, it is hard to explore the entire map at once, but at least activating these teleport waypoints will be really helpful in case you have commissions in that area and you don't want to walk all the way there, or if you do have a commission in that area and plan on walking, it's best to just get the waypoint in that area. For example, if your commission is right here, you can go from here all the way up to there, and since you're already in that area, just go and collect the waypoint too. You will thank yourself later, so go ahead and just do it. Another thing that you should invest in once you have finished the Leeway Archon quest is getting access to the Serenity Pot. Some people hold off doing the Serenity Pot until way later in the game, but I think the moment you get it, you should start working on it because you want to build up that trust rank in your Serenity Pot so that you can put furniture and also put in companions. Since you can get XP from those companions or even Primogems if you did watch the Primogem farming video about companions, you can also do that too. But still, utilize your Serenity Pot early on because you can get rewards while you are not on Genshin. Since the realm coins count over time, if you've already set up your teapot, you can just play freely and collect those coins whenever you're done, and also you'll gain access to useful resources such as Mora, EXP for weapons or characters, and just everything else that you could possibly need from the teapot. One thing you should note if you do plan on leveling up characters, just make sure you check which region they're from. More specifically, just check what materials they need, because sometimes characters have materials that are quest locked, such as Heizo, whose materials are all the way in Inazuma, and you cannot access Inazuma sadly unless you finish the Leeway Archon quest. So it wouldn't really be the best option to choose a character that requires essential materials in an area where you can't access, or in an area that is really far away such as Sumeru Desert. However, if you do know the character's essential materials and you have access to them, then it's still best to build that character if you can get their essential materials. This is a very niche thing for early game because obviously once you're late game you can access everything, but in order to progress more, you don't want to be stopped by not having the resources. Like again, back to the Heizo example, if you couldn't raise Heizo and wanted him to be your DPS, obviously he'd be doing the wrong amount of damage because you just haven't leveled him up. For characters though like Kaya, Noelle, and Amber, or even Beto, Barbara, Sucrose, and just everybody else, they all have materials that you can access in the world really easily. Same thing with Lynette, you do get a teleport waypoint to Fontaine, and I saw you already unlocked the map, so you still could raise them too, but if you haven't unlocked the region itself, then possibly don't level up those characters. However, if you do decide to level up those characters, just remember there is the trial, so if you get banner characters, make sure you do their trial so you can get their materials, so you can at least level them up to max 40, and newly in Natlan, you can also get their materials to level them up even higher if you want to do the quest. In summary, just be mindful of who you're leveling up and what materials they need, just so that you are not stopped by the fact that you can't access their materials for the quests. I hope there was something you could take away and that was helpful and that you can apply to your account, but other than that, let us check out the next account. Now we are on to our third and final account. This one is sort of a mid-range adventure rank account. So the two previous ones we looked at are a late game player and then an early game player. Now we just have the ones for the middle area. So obviously if you are in the same stage of the game, maybe these tips might apply to you. But this time I'm going to start with looking at account progress rather than looking at builds right away, because I think there's a lot that can be said about account progress. Right now, looking at the quest progress, we can see that there are a lot of world quests that has to be done, and also a lot of story quests and Archon quests. The number one thing that I am going to say when looking at this is that a lot of quests need to be done in order to progress more in the story. Clearly it says that other quests need to be completed in order to continue on to the story, which is why it's really important just to finish off these story quests. Even if it is a little bit tedious, once they're out of your way, it will be easier to progress later on. As for stuff that take a little longer, like the Chen Yu Veil one, you don't really need to do this one because it's not necessarily part of the main quest. But completing these world quests are really simple. All you have to do is talk to the NPC and go complete the quest, and then you also get some Primogems as a reward. So it's best to just finish off all those other quests before completing these Archon quests, and it doesn't even let you move forward until you complete the other quests, so obviously that's where you want to go to. Another thing I have seen is that Natlan is being explored as of now. However, other parts not really, like the desert. Fontaine doesn't seem to be unlocked that much. This part of Chen Yu Veil hasn't been unlocked and really not explored. Inazuma doesn't seem to be done either, which is why in terms of exploration, it's best to prioritize Natlan. Also, like I mentioned in the exploration video, we have the Tablet of Tona, so you can put your sigils in here and get Primogems as the reward, rather than the other stuff like the trees and the fountain, where they just give other rewards that are not Primogems. So doing Natlan will be really easy, especially considering that this account has Chaska on it and also Auroron. Chaska is really good for Natlan exploration and will definitely make the progress a lot quicker. So it's just best off to do Natlan in terms of exploration rather than the other regions. And also because of this event that grants you Primogems for exploring, it's just another reason why you should explore Natlan before the other ones. As of now, it looks like the inventory is lacking just a little bit of stuff. I'm paying attention mostly to the important things that you're going to need later, like crystal cores. You don't want to be in that situation where you need to condense a resin, but you don't have a crystal core to do so. As for other stuff like rice, shrimp, and tofu, they can all be bought, which is definitely easier because you don't want to go out and collect them. But in case you were trying to cook a bunch of dishes, you can just go and buy the ingredients in any region. Just talk to the person that runs the grocery store, and you'll be able to get those materials really quickly. As for things like these, which are the ones that characters need, you don't need to go out and farm the ones that you're not using, but for the ones that you are using, it's best to go and collect them. So the moment that they come back in your world, because there is a respawn time, just go and collect them, especially when you are free and don't have other things to do. If you just go and collect them then, you won't have to worry about it later when you're trying to level them up again, and it will just help your account in the long run if you know you have those materials available. Same for the usual stuff, just make sure that you're using your resin each day on the right things. As of now, because the account is still at AR 40, you don't need to go and farm artifacts. That's just because the max level of artifact domains has not been unlocked yet, so there's no need to go and farm artifacts if you're not doing the max level. So as of now, you might want to prioritize boss materials or talent level up materials just to get your characters up to the required amount for DPS. Speaking of which, now let's turn our attention over to the builds. These are the characters that we are working with right now. There are quite a few 5 stars, especially at this point in the game. To my knowledge, this account is not free to play. The owner of this account has bought the battle pass and the welkin, but other than that, I believe there are no other top-ups in terms of Primogems. Their main TPS is Chaska, so we're going to be building teams around Chaska. Now personally, I think Chaska is a lot of fun to play, especially if you are playing in Natlan. It would be great if there was a Fischl in this account just to use as a sub DPS character. Auroron is okay, but I'm not really a fan of his kit so much. That's why I do have some other replacement options if you don't want to use Auroron either. But just mainly looking at what we have for Chaska, it looks like the stringless is on Chaska, and I don't think they're going to be going for their weapon as of now. There are other options like Amos Bow, but because we're running with very limited options here, it seems like as of now stringless is the best one we have. But again, there are more to come if you do plan to pull on the weapon banner or on the character banner and just get a weapon. So stringless is okay for now. In terms of artifacts, again, this account is at AR 40, so they don't have access to the highest level artifact domains. But if you do plan to go farm artifacts, prioritize Chaska because she is your DPS. And also we have the Obsidian Codex, which is really good for Natlan characters, and you don't want to miss out on the buffs that Obsidian gets you. You would also want to prioritize raising talents, specifically the skill, because this is the one you're going to be using the most. And then right after, you're going to be doing the burst. You also have stringless, so this would apply to the skill and burst too. Just make sure that if you are leveling up talents, you are leveling up the skill and burst. Same thing for your support characters. Don't worry too much about the normal attacks. Like I can see that Bennett has his normal attack at 2. Let's just hope it stays there because we really don't need his normal attacks to be leveled up that much since we're only using his skill and burst, his skill for energy and his burst for buffing, and the same goes for Xiangling. Also, Chaska can be at least leveled up to the maximum we have. That's mainly because she is an animo DPS and requires level in order to make her reactions stronger, rather than characters that do melt and vaporize, which can crit. So in this case, her level really matters a little bit more than the others would. The moment you have EXP, try to level her up to the max you can go. As for Bennett, I really think that you should be using Favonius on him. For now, Sacrificial is okay for energy recharge, but the moment you do get Favonius, highly recommend putting it on him, mainly because that weapon just grants so much energy recharge. Or if you can find a sword with a higher base attack, that would also be really good too. As for artifacts, that's good to know there are energy recharge ones on him, but the moment that you also get access to the Noblesse Oblige domain, that would be really helpful too. Or if you choose to strongbox the artifacts, that's totally okay too. It's probably more efficient to strongbox Noblesse Oblige, mainly just because that domain is quite annoying to do, and also you really don't need the other artifact set that comes with it. As for Xiangling, I can see that she's running prototype Star Glitter. However, I really recommend putting the catch on her. That's because of the passive that the catch gives, and also how accessible the catch is to get to R5 rather than prototype Star Glitter, which you need to craft it. So the moment you get access to fishing in Inazuma, try and farm the catch refinements and the catch weapon itself, and just try to level it up to 90 because that is a great weapon that you can use on her, and it is one of her best support weapons. You also want to prioritize leveling up her burst at most, and the same thing goes for Bennett's burst. Now let's just look at a few teams. Obviously the team you are running right now is okay. However, if you do want to switch it up a little bit, I would replace Auroron with Mona. That's because I really like Mona's summon, and that means you can trigger the vaporize reaction. And since Mona does have a taunt, all the enemies will go in that area, so it'll be easier to get Chaska hits on them. Also, since the current team looks like it is an overload reaction, the enemies will be bouncing away from Chaska, which might be harder to hit, but again, Chaska does fly, so it might not be that big of a deal. However, I think it'll still be easier to group up the enemies and take them down when they are together. If you want to start looking for a second team for the Abyss, one thing you could consider is starting to build a Hyper Bloom team, since we do have Nuvilet coming very soon. Nahida and Nuvilet run really well for Hyper Bloom, and also you do have Kuki, which is a popular Hyper Bloom person. Kuki is a great support that you could start investing in and will work really well into a Hyper Bloom team, but if for any reason you don't want to run a Hyper Bloom team, you could always run an Aggravate team too. We have Kuching, Nahida, and if you want to build Kale, that's possible as well, but I still think that running a Nuvilet Hyper Bloom team or any team with Nuvilet is going to be better than a Kuching Aggravate. You also have our wonderful magician Linny in her account, which I am really happy to see. However, in terms of the supports that you have available, you could run a Mono Pyro comp with Linny, Bennett, and Xiangling. That is if you choose to take them off the Chaska team, but it seems like Linny right now is sort of unusable because he runs best in a Mono Pyro team. If you do decide to run a Linny team and take these two off, you will need extra support characters for Chaska's team. You could run an Electro Charge team with Kuki and Barbara, or replace Barbara for Mona, but as of now you would have to wait for more supports for Linny. Also remember that Linny is a charge attack character and he will be pretty vulnerable when he has his bow out, so if you do decide to main Linny instead and abandon your Chaska, I would suggest investing in Zhongli's upcoming banner because he is going to have a shield which is going to help you against those big enemies that might knock you out, and also because Linny does have interesting mechanics regarding his HP, you'll want to have some control over that, and a shield is exactly what you want to do. Also, the bow that he is running right now is mainly a support bow, and as we know, Linny is not a support character, so your best option right now would be to go and get the Fontaine craftable bow. That is the bow that I currently run on Linny. I do have Amos bow, but I just haven't leveled it up yet, but the Fontaine craftable bow is really accessible and is a great option for Linny in terms of its HP mechanics. You will want to run a Linny with Bennett because of his healing circle and buffing, and also Bennett is Pyro, so it's perfect for a Mono Pyro team. However, the downside would be you would have to remove Bennett or Xiangling from the original Chaska team to accommodate for your Linny Mono Pyro team. As I mentioned before, here is the bow that you could get. It is a Fontaine craftable weapon and it works really well on Linny because it regards his HP mechanics where he decreases HP and you're going to want to heal it up again so he can make more damage. And it's also super easy to get because you can just go out and farm the materials for it and then go ahead and craft it. I think in terms of account progress, this account has been doing pretty good and it seems like content is being cleared, and so far it doesn't seem like there has been a real struggle to defeat enemies. I think it's mainly because Chaska is a really strong DPS character, and when paired with the right support, she can do a ton of damage. I would say because this account is not entirely free to play, it does have a slight advantage because it does get extra Primogems and access to Battle Pass weapons, but I don't necessarily see a true need to continue to have the Battle Pass and the Welkin. There are still a ton of Primogems available on the map, and if you haven't explored, then you really haven't unlocked its full potential. Exploration progress is still really low, which means there are a lot of Primogems to scour around the area. It seems like Primogems are pretty low, so you might want to wait until the next few banners to pull, or if you are really insistent on getting Nuvilet or Zhongli, you could start exploring now to try and get them, but I don't really think it's necessary to be pulling on the Chaska or Linny banners anymore since you already have them, and right now you want to get more characters you can build teams around rather than build constellations for a singular character. My final note for this account is just remember to save your fragile resin, use your regular resin, and all these things that you have saved up here, you're going to want to save them until you are able to do artifact domains and the highest level of everything, just in order to maximize your resources to its highest efficiency. But other than that, that will be all for this video. Those were the 3 accounts that I have reviewed today. I am sort of still running this as a test run because this is the first episode of the account repair series. So if you do have feedback regarding the format of anything, or if there's things you specifically want to see, please do let me know in the comments. I would like to hear your feedback, and I would also like to hear anything you have to say regarding my tips and feedback that I've gave to these accounts too. But thank you so much for sticking around to watch the video. If you have any other ideas for videos that you want to see, let me know in the comments and I will try to get to those videos. Other than that, thank you so much, good luck on your pulls, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all in our next video. Bye!